goal setting and expectancy theories. They're part of the workplace when it comes down to it. On goal setting theory, the idea is you set ambitious but attainable goals, and that'll improve performance if the goals are accepted. One of the most common areas that we use it for is called MBO, Management by Objectives. It's a very common administrative manager workplace assessment or annual evaluation, or maybe semi-annual evaluation as you go through. Typically what happens is you set up your assessment tool, you take the top 10 duties of a job, you have different ratings. Typically, you want to use a 5-point scale. That's probably pretty much a standard scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with 5 being the best score, 1 being the weakest score. And you go through and it's called the Likert scale. You use your Likert scale, and then also you have 2 to 4 different jobs that you focus in that year for being goals that are agreed upon between the supervisor and the employee. So normally you're going to have 12 to 14 different things in your performance assessment. And then you talk about the different objectives, and you have a joint plan as you go through. You set the organizational objectives, but really you're setting those objectives with your mission statement. You want to have your tactical planning and your operational plans. Pretty much the goals you're talking about over here, they all tie in together, so that individual assessment ties into the organization goal, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So the employee has these goals, so they set organizational objectives, they link them to the employee's goals, and then you watch them over the next year, and then you evaluate the performance, and they're rewarded. Either they reward it if it's done well, or they reward it if it's not done well, probably in a negative fashion as you go through. And then the next year, you sit down there and reassess those goals that are flexible. Now, the thing about MBO, it's fabulous, except one of the problems is that when you sit down there and you focus in on 2 to 4 different goals that tie into the organization, there are times when the employee forgets about the rest of the job they're supposed to do, and they focus on that because they might get a bonus if they achieve a 3% market growth in this area, or 7% efficiency by reducing cost over here. They focus on that, and they kind of leave the rest of the job behind. It's important to make certain that the whole program be considered in the aspect of MBO. It's a very common form of assessment for leaders and for top chief executives, as well as your directors, your managers, and your supervisors. And it really does help you drive through the organization's overall overarching goals down to the lowest levels. You also have an expectancy theory. If I do this, what do I get out of it? Well, it depends on the outcome. Okay, so can I accomplish a task? And by the way, when I do, what's my reward? This is becoming a stronger place in the workforce right now, especially with the millennials and the Gen Z. Pay attention to it, because everybody's looking for instant gratification about accomplishing a goal in their task, even if it's part of their normal task. Expectations, they are going to vary from person to person. Some people you never have to watch. You just tell them, hey, I want this done, and they get it done. You can go back and check them in a week. They're still doing it. A month, they're still doing it, doing what you want, and sometimes more than what you want on top of it. Other ones, you almost have to prod them down and say, hey, come on, come on. When is that being done? It just depends on the person as you go through. Expectancy theory, can I accomplish the task? Well, if I do, what's in it for me? No, nah, I'll do something else. I'll find it out, okay? But it depends when they're motivated. Sometimes they're only rewarded if they get the task done, or if they know a task is going to be done, then they'll sit down and what's the reward? Once they discover what that is, then they'll do the task. So it depends on the personality, but this is becoming more dominant in the process. So a lot of it really comes down to 5 steps. Determine what rewards the employees value, what the employee's performance standard is, ensure the standards are attainable, tie rewards performance, and make certain the employees feel the rewards are adequate. Sometimes you have different levels of rewards depending upon the employee's expectations and your expectations as a leader as you go through. Of all of them, equity theory is a big, big deal, and it's much more powerful than we actually realize. It really is the idea that we want to have equity between inputs and outputs compared to others. Working in human resources, every once in a while, we'd actually do a reclassification study. Those are awful. They're terrible. Everybody hates everybody by the time they're done. What it is you bring in typically an outside consultant. You do a market basket study where you take the job that they're in and you compare it to other places that have comparable jobs. Sometimes it's public sector versus public sector, like education and the hospital. Sometimes it's public sector with the private sector. Okay, senior administrative assistants, they make this much money in the private sector. How about over here? Let's compare that. So what happens is you compare that job to a market basket or a group of comparable industry comparables to look at and to benchmark it. And then you see if the wage and benefits are the same or they're over or they're lower. And then you position them properly. Well, sometimes you have somebody, let's say, okay, you've done this, you are officially a level 130. That's your pay grade. And you, okay, this is your duty and responsibilities, you're a 134. But the 130 works twice as hard as the 134. The 134 blows it off all the time. But officially, the way it works according to the study is I'm looking at the overall level of responsibility for the position, not the performance of the individual employee. That's what they say. Okay, but that being said, it doesn't matter what happens. The outcomes are so divisive. Everybody hates everybody else for 3 years, and they especially hate those people in HR for doing the study to begin with. Equity is a big deal among employees, and if you don't pay attention to it, you can sit down there, people would drive themselves apart whenever you try doing comparisons, because equity is a huge driver between human beings. So on this section, know all about MBO. MBO is a huge tool for management and is still in existence after 40 years since its founding. And then also the equity theory as to what is critical between equity between employees. Take care.